heading to the paint store to go get the epoxy primer needed for the motor, but this is the color we're going with. It's a blazing copper. Also have it on the 4-link bars. Already used some of it. Can't remember exactly. They discontinued this, so I can't remember. Last time they told me to use a different, I think, hardener. That for some reason this base coat, I believe, need hardener or something. So we're gonna ask them what it was that I used last time to make this work. But it's a pretty sick color. Looks really good, and this is what I've been planning to put on the motor the whole entire time. All right, so got the word from the paint store, and this is actually going to be a 16 to 16 to 1 mix. That's going to be paint, 16 parts paint, 16 parts reducer, 1 part hardener, which is kind of weird on a base coat because most of the time base coat does not have hardener in it, but this one does. Getting ready to paint the motor. Got it all masked up. Harmonic balancer, yes, most people pull it, but I paid TKM to actually put it on to make sure it's perfect and precise due to the level that this motor is at, and so I don't feel like pulling it off. So taped up where the water pump is going to go. Pull the valve covers off, went ahead and taped them. That way it's just perfect. I mean, I could have taped up the old valve covers. We'll come back in and back tape some tape to that, and then fold the paper over the cart. I can just roll this in, but you have to come in here and all your little bolt holes, you gotta roll up tape and stick them in all the little bolt holes. That way there's no paint that gets inside the threads or anything when you paint stuff like this. And the block actually had these sticking out. They were, let's see here, they were like this. And I actually cut them off because they were looking like they could be in the way when we do the headers, since there is one here and it does need to swoop tight to the block. So I actually just went ahead and cut it off. Not sure what that's from for the factory, but it's definitely not needed, so I shaved that down. Got rid of that. But yeah, I'm gonna paint all inside the valley since it's a high ram intake that goes on it. I can just see inside all of that. Not gonna paint none of that because the transmission obviously bolts up there, but this is how you do your tape. This is called back tape. So when you stick tape to the bottom of it like this, and then you come and stick your plastic to that or paper, and then that goes over the edge. So I'll go around and back tape that whole flange. But yeah, ran out of time today, so tomorrow I will do an etching primer on the whole block. That the etching primer will bite into the metal, and then I will go over top of that base coat. So we'll show y'all how we do that. All right, Mike, what are we doing this morning?
I'm getting ready to go find an oil change for Randy's truck. None of the things I fucking have synthetic.
Alright, so we're about to shoot the motor this morning. We're going to lay some epoxy primer on it. We got Omni MP170. All that is epoxy primer. All your epoxy and etching primer helps stick to metal. It actually bites into the metal versus like your high fill urethane primers. All they do is fill in scratches and they don't actually bite into the metal. So anytime you're painting on metal, you want to use epoxy primer. So right there on the front of like the Omnis, it tells you what it should mix at, which this one mixes at 2 to 1. So all you would do is come on your paint cup, find your 2 to 1 column. Your first parts would go to right there, which is primer. So that's 2 parts primer, and then 1 part of the hardener. So that's your one. So it's 2 parts, 1 part. The numbers are just so you stay in the same bracket. So like if you fill it up with primer to the number 4, so 2 parts primer to the 4, and then 1 part hardener to the 4. And then on this one, it actually shows reducer if you want to use it, so you can reduce that 10% if you wanted to add a reducer. But I'm not adding reducer to this one. We're just shooting straight primer right onto the motor. Alright, and on your primer, always get your data sheet if you don't know what's going on, because like with your epoxy primers, it actually says right here you have to allow it 15 minutes before you can even spray it. So right now it's sitting in the gun, and I got the timer set, so that'll sit for 15 minutes before you can even spray it. Now I did mess up on the rear end of my car actually and mixed this up and shot it straight. Did not allow for 15 minutes, but then once I sprayed it, I allowed like a good 15-20 minutes, and then rolled over it with paint, and have not had an issue. But I don't like to test the rules, I guess you could say, of not following the guidelines, because then what happens is you end up having to redo products. Now on your normal urethane primer, you'll just mix that and just roll straight on that. You ain't got to allow it to sit or nothing like that. And then if you flip it, it tells you everything between coats. So after you do your first coat, you actually gotta wait 15 minutes, whereas on your urethane primers or filler primers, you can literally let it flash like 3 to 5 minutes, plus you can put accelerators in them and you can rock and roll. But with this etching kind of primer, you gotta wait at least 15 minutes after your first coat and 30 minutes after your second coat. And then it says right there, it's important that it must be scuffed and reapplied if allowed to sit more than 3 days. So with epoxy primers, what I'll do is I'll shoot the primer, let it sit for 30 minutes after my second coat, and then we'll roll straight over a base coat, and we will not scuff it, because you do not have to scuff. No sanding, nothing like that to epoxy primers. I've seen a lot of people take epoxy primers and then scuff it so their next layer will stick, and that's wrong. There's no reason to scuff epoxy primers. Read your data sheets and they'll tell you, unless it sits. But your epoxy primers, you'll put on like metal, and like if you're doing a car restoration, you'll put it on metal, and then you're not supposed to really sand epoxy primers. You're supposed to use a filler primer or a urethane primer, same thing, to actually like sand in what they call blocks. If you hear somebody saying I gotta shoot primer and block the car out, what they're doing is they're blocking a urethane or a filler primer. Hopefully, if they're doing it correctly, they're not blocking an epoxy primer. So epoxy primer, all it is to bite and prep the metal. That's all it does. That's its job. There's other products that do other jobs. Alright, so mixing up our base coat. So as you've seen when we left the paint store, this base coat is 16 parts paint, 16 parts reducer, and 1 part hardener. So on these cups, these are your ratios up top. Okay, so you'd be looking for a 16, 16, 1. Problem is, it don't exist. Okay, so how you do ratios is all that is 16 parts to 16 parts to 1 part. So you can measure it any way you want. You could do 16 right here, 16 in 1 cup of paint, 16 in another cup of reducer, and then 1 down here of hardener. Problem is that's way too much. So I need to consolidate it. I don't need that much for the motor I'm painting. So I chose these little cups. Here's the catch with the little cups. They don't have 16, 16, 1 either. So you might be like, what do I do? Okay, split your 16 in half. So 16 divided by 2 is going to be 8. So go 8 parts paint, 8 parts reducer, and then you can't go 1 part because you split the other ones in half. So now you're going to go 0.5 on hardener because you're going to split that whole ratio in half. This is more manageable. This should be enough paint because this is going to add to this, so you're actually going to have double. So picture these two stacked on top of each other. It's quite a bit of paint. So this should be plenty to paint that motor with. So anytime you're working with ratios, don't get worried if they're not on top of the paint cup. Just think back to math. Normally I try to split things in half and get it down to a more usable formula. Also, if you had, like, let's say a 10 to 1, sometimes I might go, which you actually have a 10 to 1 there, so that's a bad example, but say you didn't have a 10 to 1. You know, you might do a 5, and then you could use this column, even though this is not 1. So you could go 5 to the 6 hit, and then if it was a 5 to 2, you'd be going to that 6 also. But if you were doing a 5 to 1, you go to that 6, and then I eyeball it and split that 2 in half to a 1. So just split formulas, but just remember, if you split a ratio, you have to split it across the whole entire board. Let's mix this up and paint a motor. This color, for anybody that's wondering, is called Hot Hues. This is a blazing copper. Pretty sure this line is discontinued, or at least my paint supplier doesn't sell it no more. I might be able to find it online. But I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful copper. So this is what I did all the 4-link bars with on the car, and I've been saving this to do the motor with. Okay, so we're going to take these little cups and we're going to mix them all into a big cup. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pour my paint in first, and you can see how thick it is, okay? So a lot of it's not running out. I don't want to waste this stuff. This stuff, like I said, I think it's discontinued and I can't get it possibly. So now I'm going to take my reducer. Reducer is almost like paint thinner. And we're going to actually pour the reducer in this cup, and I'm going to clean this cup out with, man, look at that color. Man, that is beautiful, man. This is the joys of being a painter. Okay, so we're going to actually clean that cup out. Try to get this off because I don't want more of that. We're just going to stir this up. Try to get it up here, as you can see how easily it cuts that paint. So it thins it out, it reduces it. It's a reducer. Okay, so I'm going to make sure we try to flush all of this out of this if we can. I don't want to waste any of this color. So I'm going to mix this stick in there. I'm going to take this, and I'm also going to pour it. This is just how I do it. I'm going to pour it where the reducer runs across this because I want to clean this cup of all this paint. I don't want to waste this paint. Like, especially if you're messing with this expensive paint or paint like this that you don't have no more of. Okay. So there's still some left in there, but you can see that we got a lot of it. And what I might actually do is pour some out of this back into here, stir this up, and just keep flushing back and forth to get that out. So now what we got to do is add 1 part hardener in here, actually 0.5, not 1 part. So 0.5 hardener in here, and then put that in the cup and stir it all together. So there's your 0.5. To me, that's a 0.5 pretty much. And I'm just actually, since this is discontinued, they don't have the hardener and the reducer and everything that it calls for on this. On the back of the can, there's actually instructions for another thing. But we're actually just using an Omni hardener. This is clear coat hardener. My paint supplier said that this will substitute just fine without issues, and I've actually already done this. It's fine. So now we're going to take our 0.5 that's in here, pour it in our paint. There goes our hardener. And stir it all up. And like I said, I'm going to flush it out of that one. Just to make sure. You can see how transparent it is now. I mean, it really lowers it. Okay, so we got the first coat banged out, base coat. Now we're gonna mix up, first coat, base coat. I'm only gonna do one coat of base coat. So I'm gonna mix up clear. This goes back to the other video. Remember when I was talking about dirty clear? On something like this, again, I don't have a lot of this paint. I want it to go far. I want great coverage. So I'm not cleaning out my cup. I'm gonna leave this in there, leave this in the paint gun, and what's actually left in here, I'm gonna pour it into the clear when I'm done mixing it. So your clear does not say it on the front. Let's see if it says it anywhere. It does not, but I do know that this clear mixes 4 to 1. So you're gonna find, again, your column, 4 to 1 to 1. 4 parts clear, 1 part hardener, 1 part reducer. So we're gonna get a little bit of that and mix the leftover base coat in there that we've already mixed up, because we don't want to put it back in the can because it has hardener in it. So anything that has hardener in it, you cannot pour back and say once it has hardener in it, it's trash, because it will harden up. So we want to use this color up and not waste it. So there it is, all mixed up. We took our 4 and we were at number 4. I'm sorry, took our 4, we were at number 4. So that was clear coat, and then we poured our hardener to that level 4, and then we poured our reducer to that level 4. So normally, and that's a 4 to 1 to 1. Again, the numbers are just to keep you in line so you know what step you're on. Normally when you spray base coat, you hammer on your base coat, and then I let it flash off for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then go in there and hammer on my clear coat. However, I checked this base coat, because like I said, I haven't used this, but it was about a year ago since I did 4-link bars. And you come back here and read the application directions, and it says right here to let your base coat flash off 15 to 30 minutes before your clear coat. So if I would have sprayed this base coat and treated it like my normal Omni 270 or Omni base coat, not Omni 270, then I would have messed up. I would have been spraying clear coat over top of a wet base coat. You don't want that. Most products you want to let them flash off or dry before you hammer on another coat. So always read your manufacturer's directions and make sure you're not doing something wrong. You definitely don't want to lock in a wet coat underneath something else. So if your base coat, I mean it has hardeners and everything in it, if it would have been on there wet and then you shot your clear coat over top of that, then if your clear coat dries before your base coat, then your base coat is still trying to dry and gas out. So the gas wants to go up, and that's how you lift and spider crack and wrinkle clear coat and have all kinds of failures. So just read the directions before you shoot products until you're familiar with them. Now my clear coat, that's just straight clear. So the gun has some base coat left over in it. So we're just gonna pour the base coat straight in there. Now I didn't want to do this beforehand because then it would have messed up my mixing ratios and my levels. So I always want to do that afterward. And then we're gonna stir this well. So this is what I call dirty clear coat. Nothing's been cleaned out, just leftovers all mixed together. Stir this up well, and then put this in the gun, and that's our clear coat. Man, it's a beautiful color. All right, there she goes. She's painting. Look at that color, man. I think it's beautiful. So that is 2 coats of base coat. You spray your first coat, and then I did not run any accelerator in this coat today. So normally you would let that flash 8 to 10 minutes, but I did an 8-minute flash and then come back in here and pound it on some more. So that's only 2 coats as planning. And the second coat's actually really wet, so it's definitely enough coverage. You can definitely do this yourself. It's not like it's that hard, it's just an engine block. So if you get any runs or any mistakes, it's probably not going to be seen at the end of the day anyway. So this is a pretty cool piece that you could do at your house. You can literally do it in your yard, wherever you want to do it at. It don't matter if it gets trash in it, because the block has all kinds of imperfections, as you can see on it anyway. So you're not going to be able to even tell if it's trash or if it's imperfections in the block like a lot of this is. But yeah, it turned out pretty good. Let's see here. Check the light, hit it with the light, and there's what she looks like in the sun. I mean, that thing is, this is actually called a sunlight, so this simulates what sunlight will look like on paint. But you can see it, I mean, that is just absolutely, it flops a copper tangerine color. So, and that's what all the 4-link bars on the car are done with underneath the car. But yeah, I think it turned out sick. It's definitely gonna look good in the car. There you go.